Design One, I hope you're doing well. We're going to talk a little bit about this week's instruction and kind of what we did this week in class. We got started on our first painting, which is a still life of some pears, and I'll kind of lead into that. But before we get there, I want to take a moment and kind of show you the work of Caitlin Winter. Caitlin Winter is a contemporary artist that I follow on Instagram. Really like her work. I like that she also posts quite a bit of process imagery, that allows the viewer to kind of see what's going on behind the scenes and kind of how she's thinking through, laying out a painting and the layers in a painting. This is one of her portraits that she's done. This is her Instagram handle, paintings rather by Caitlin. So if you're interested in checking that out, I would highly recommend it. Here's kind of an example of some of the things that she sometimes will post. Like these are, two portraits that she's done. But again, she's definitely doesn't shy away from showing you kind of the layers underneath. So this week we looked at Salvador Mundi in class, and we talked about, or they talked about in that video how, when they used different X-rays, they could kind of deconstruct the layers behind that painting as far as how the layers of paint were added. And it always makes me wonder, what was it like? Like, what was the first part that Da Vinci, laid down on the Mona Lisa? Or what was the first part that he laid down on, say, Salvador Mundi? And, artists, I think sometimes when we see a finished product as a viewer or as the audience, we're kind of overwhelmed by the whole. And sometimes we forget that what we see isn't necessarily, what that looked like in all stages. You have to kind of deconstruct that. So this is kind of an example of that painting I just showed you of Caitlin um, Winter, and you can see where she's kind of framing that in. And I call this kind of framing, where the artist kind of blocks in things with contour. And artists can start off a painting in a ton of different ways. They could do it in a pencil. We're going to actually do it in charcoal. If you don't have charcoal, you can use a pencil. A lot of artists will actually do it with paint. They'll just take a small round brush and kind of come in there and kind of lay it out. I'm guessing that's kind of what she has done here. And then other artists will project and trace. Some artists will photograph and then do a rubbing on the back of a photo and transfer it in. There's tons of different ways to approach painting. But I love her approach, and that's going to be the approach that we kind of teach and follow, where you block it in, you kind of continue to frame things in or block it in, and then you start with your darker values and develop those first, and then you kind of staircase out of your darker values with your midtones, and then you kind of work your way up into your lightest values at the end. And notice that she's working on a kind of a mid-tone surface. It's not a super bright white like you see here. I love the idea of doing that too. You start off with a mid-tone underpainting, and then you kind of develop your darkest darks. Again, then you kind of staircase out of that. So this is kind of an example of her doing that. She probably adds the whites a little quicker than we're going to, but nonetheless, you can see kind of how this is developed and then developed until the end product. I'm going to kind of go through that one more time. Again, kind of blocking it in. We're going to block it in charcoal, and then kind of quickly transition into to paint. Block in the dark values, and then again kind of staircase out. And notice that there's layers and layers that are kind of put on there, and that's okay. That's definitely, I think, one of the best ways to work. So this is kind of a traditional still life. This was actually painted by a famous artist named Paul Cézanne. Paul Cézanne is not going to be in our art history component. He's not one of the 33 artists that we talk about in Design One, but he was really well known kind of in the late 19th century, and a lot of his work was kind of a lead-in to like Pablo Picasso, George Braque, who developed Cubism. But you can see here, you can see his underpainting, you can see some of those contours, you can even see the original kind of contours that are laid out underneath the pears. And then you can see, the darker areas and then these lighter areas that were developed last. So this is what we're going to be working from. I wish everybody had real fruit in front of them, but again, what I did was went and purchased some and then kind of set up a good light source and then gave us something to work from. So as we transition from this, I'm going to have this slideshow kind of in the background of the painting demo that I recorded in class. And then I'm also going to put this slideshow in the same folder for you, so if you want to access it or have it up while you're painting, you can do that too. But this will be kind of a follow along, and we worked about halfway through this painting this week, which is what this video is going to include, and then next week I'll roll out the second video, and we'll finish up that first painting, which is going to be of obviously a still life of pears. So as I transition here, I don't have any words right at first, but I started to lay this out in charcoal, and then I realized I forgot to videotape it, so then I kind of went back over it in charcoal. But I'm just doing this kind of real loosely. Notice how I'm holding my charcoal pencil kind of towards the end, so that I'm kind of loosely doing that. And then the proportions on our panels that I sent home with you, and if you haven't picked those up in the office, be sure you do that ASAP so that you have your materials. Again, it's a little bit more square-like, so I adjusted the composition a little bit. But have fun with this, and good luck. And if you haven't painted much, I hope you really enjoy this, and I'm sure you will. Thanks. All right, I want to take a few seconds here just to talk to you a little bit about paintbrushes. Paintbrushes come in a lot of different sizes. Definitely some are large, some are small. Overall, generally the paintbrushes are made with a wooden handle that's painted. This section of the paintbrush is called a ferrule, which is just the metal part that transitions from the handle to the bristles. And one of the types of paintbrushes that are used is something called a flat. And a flat, the bristles come down into the ferrule. The ferrule is crimped. Therefore, when you look at it, everything is kind of flat. And then a flat is also kind of flat and chiseled on top. So this is a pretty large one. Here's another example of a flat, a little bit smaller. Again, typically the brushes have a number here that correspond to the size. One of my most favorite brushes is called a filbert. And a filbert, very similar to a flat. The bristles come in, the ferrule has been crimped, but instead of having a chiseled top, kind of has a rounded edge on the side. These are really nice to come in and do dry brushing. Again, the bristles are kind of lined up in a flat direction as well. Another popular type of brush is called a round, and a round, very similar, except the ferrule has not been crimped. Therefore the bristles kind of come out in a circular pattern. Again, rounds come in all kinds of different sizes. Like this is an 8, and like this is a 2, quite a bit smaller. And then, something like this, you can see how small that is, would be used to do detail type stuff. So as you get started on this, maybe a medium-sized round would be good. And if you have a medium-sized filbert or flat, one of those would work as well. The other thing I want to mention real quick is that the bristles can kind of be split into two categories. They have synthetic bristles. Like these are synthetic, meaning that they're man-made. You can tell they're kind of a real bright white. These here are likely a hog hair bristle. So they're actually from an animal. A lot of animal hair is used for paintbrushes.